זה ה-Q? רגע. עזרא, סימנת לי?
כן.
שלום לכולם, אנחנו שוב בשידור לחוסן לאומי, לפיוס ולאחדות ולעניין. כרגיל אנחנו פותחים פה את האולם שלנו ואת המועדון בזמן שאנחנו משדרים לאנשים שלא רוצים להישאר לבד, חברי פורום וכל מי שרוצה מרמת גן. היום אני לא רק גאה ונרגשת, האמת היא אני קצת עצבנית ולחוצה, כי האורח שלנו היום הוא קנת' אברמוביץ, שהוא יהודי חם, יהודי אמריקאי חם, הוא אנליסט מבריק, המקצוע שלו זה אנליזה לניתוח מצבי סיכון, הוא גם מנתח כלכלי, הוא גם מחבר הספר שנקרא באנגלית The Multifront War, על המלחמה שמנהלים כנגד המערב מכל הצדדים האפשריים, והוא יספר לנו עליה. הוא גם היזם והמקים של האתר SaveTheWest, פשוט כנסו SaveTheWest.com ותמצאו הרבה מאוד חומרים שכן מנתח, ואולי אם היינו מקשיבים לו קצת יותר אז היינו במקום יותר טוב. So I'll say, קנת' מדבר רק אנגלית, אז אנחנו נעשה את הרעיון באנגלית, אנחנו מניחים שרובכם מבינים, מדי פעם אני אנסה לתרגם, אבל אנחנו בעיקר סומכים עליך. So we're saying hello to Kenneth Abramowitz. Hello my darling, how are you?
Very good.
I said that you're a very good friend. Sorry?
Kol Beseder, Toda.
Good. And we invited you today to get your notions about our situation and about the situation around the world and the fights against the West. You are the expert.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So I will speak for about 15 minutes, and then we can have a discussion, or I can keep talking a little longer.
As much as you need.
Okay, great. So let me just spend 1 minute on myself. I'm a professional business analyst in the healthcare field for 45 years. And I wrote 25 books during that period of time that I was an analyst, and on Wall Street in New York. And I work 6 days a week. And on 9/11, when America was attacked, I and everybody else was shocked, just like you're shocked now. I was shocked after 9/11, and I was listening to the television like everybody, or the internet, and I was not happy with the analysis that I heard on the television. So I said to myself, since I'm a professional analyst, I will analyze the situation, but I must learn more. So I decided to devote 1 day a week to studying, just as a concerned citizen, just like everybody listening here today. And then I kept spending more and more time, and now I spend about 3 days a week learning and speaking about national security, and 3 days a week of working as an analyst in the healthcare field, in managing money in the healthcare field, in the stock market, and in venture capital. So I divide my life between work and what I call public service. and I try to give about 100 speeches a year on how to save Western civilization. Western civilization is just a nice word for democracy. So the question is how to save democracy. And about half the people in the world live in a democracy, and half of the people live in a dictatorship. And this conflict between democracy and dictatorship, we think it's new. It's actually been going on since the beginning of humans. It's the question is, who is in control of a society? Is it the people? In America, we call it we the people. Or is it the dictator? And
כן, אתה שומע אותי עכשיו? Can you hear me?
yes.
I will make a little pause and I'll try to translate some of the things you were saying to our audience. Ken was saying that he actually wrote 8 books. He's למה באנגלית? אוקיי, אמרתי לפני זה, אני לחוצה, אז ככה. אז כן מספר לנו שקודם כל הוא כתב 8 ספרים, הוא אנליסט ומתמחה בסכנות בעיקר בבריאות. אחרי נפילת התאומים הוא התעורר והגיע למסקנה שכל האנליסטים מסביב, כולם הופתעו, כל האנשים שמדברים על הדברים, כולם הופתעו, והוא בעצם, זה המקצוע שלו, הוא אנליסט, לכן הוא צריך לעשות את המחקר. הוא התחיל לעשות את המחקר והוא הגיע למסקנה שהוא בעצם מיפה את הסכנות שיש על המערב מצד כל מיני גורמים שתכף הוא יפרט אותם. הגורמים האלה זה זירה שתוקפת את המערב, ובעצם מבחינתו המערב זה הדמוקרטיות. עכשיו הוא מדבר על הסכנה של סוגי הרודנות. כן, we are with you now with tyranny, about tyranny.
Okay, so during the almost 25 years that I've been analyzing national security, I created a website called SaveTheWest.com. Everybody should subscribe to it. I write an article every 2 weeks on what is wrong and how to fix it. I monitor 100 problems that democracies face. The problems you have in Israel are the same problems we have in the United States. And so I monitor 100 different issues, and I write about one issue every 2 weeks.
So there's יש 100 סכנות לדמוקרטיות בעולם, הוא כותב על זה מדי שבוע, ובאמת תיכנסו SaveTheWest.com.
Right. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, I wrote a book called The Multifront War. And then I updated it last year. And I just finished a new chapter, and it will be published in December, will be the update of my book on the Multifront War. And the key idea behind the Multifront War is that we all, everyone in democracy has 100 challenges, and we must confront, solve the 100 challenges simultaneously. You cannot just say that I want to fix challenge number 68 and think that you can succeed. It's, as I said, it's a multi-front war. There's many enemies fighting in many different ways, and we must fight all the enemies in many different ways, all at the same time. And you should bear in mind that I come from the business world. And in the business world, companies have 100 challenges every day. It's not like only Israel or only Jews have 100 challenges. Companies like Johnson & Johnson and other companies that you would be familiar with, they have 100 challenges every day. And they try to fix each of the 100 challenges every single day.
But when you're saying challenges, כשאתה אומר שיש לישראל ולמערב 100 אתגרים, do you mean existential challenges or just challenges as we know them?
Well, each challenge is a normal challenge, but when you put the 100 together, it's an existential challenge.
Right.
So you might think in Israel you have an existential challenge, but we have the same existential challenge in America. In Europe has existential challenge. Every single democracy has existential challenge because the dictatorships, which I color code the red, the green, and the blue. The three groups of dictatorships, the reds are the communists, socialists, the green are the Islamists, the blue are the globalists, color-coded blue for the United Nations color. These three groups of dictatorships have declared war on democracy. So we're in a state of war, not because we want to be in a state of war, not because we declared war for Israel until recently, but we're always in a state of war. Human beings are always in a state of war ever since Cain and Abel, since the biblical days. So the war continues. Human beings are always in a state of war, just like animals are always in a state of war. Some animals trying to eat somebody, and some larger animals trying to eat them. So we think we're much different from the animals, but we're only slightly above animals. And
Okay, I'll translate it for a second and I'll ask you a question. מה שקנט ניתח ואמר שיש ברית בין שלושה צבעים, הצבע האדום זה הסוציאליסטים קומוניסטים, הצבע אוקיי, אני שכחתי, תכף נעלה את זה, חשבתי, יש את האסלאמיסטים ויש את הגלובליסטים, שהם שלושת הגלובליסטים זה הכחול, אז האסלאמיסטים זה הירוק, כולם מנהלים מאבק כנגד המערב, קנט אומר שזה ברור שיש מלחמה, מכיוון שטבע הדברים זה שהכל נמצא במלחמה, ועכשיו אני רוצה לשאול אותך, I want to ask you, Kenneth, do you think that it's the nature of the world and the nature of human beings to be in a state of war, especially when it seems like first time in the history of mankind or any living kind, there's enough goods, enough food, enough space for everybody, so you don't have to actually have fight for essentials to your own existence, because it seems like what you call the West, the democracy of the West, has put down their weapons, thinking that was there food for everybody, and everybody thrives. There's no need to fight anymore.
Well, animals fight for food. Or for wives, but in general, animals fight for food. Humans do not have to fight for food anymore. But we fight for ideology, and so the animals only kill another animal in order to eat. Only humans kill other humans for the enjoyment, if that's enjoyable, or because they have to, either for offense or defense, to protect themselves.
So you think we'll never have a whole society that puts down the weapon altogether and they decide that there's no more reasons to fight over food, and fighting for ideology would maybe there's more to it than ideology, because ideology it's actually fighting for the way of your life. If you're pro freedom and your enemy is a tyrant, is a dictator, and he's fighting to force his ideology, so you have to fight for your freedom.
Yes. So whenever somebody says the word peace, I always say to myself, the word peace does not exist. The only word that exists is war. It's 100% war 100% of the time for 100% of the existence of human beings. That's what we do. We want peace. We dream about peace, but the reality is we're always in a state of war. So my argument is,
I'm sorry, I've got to say that. I've just realized you're naming the socialist communist, the globalist, and the Islamist. And the funny thing is, all of them, their main reason to fight us is peace. If you take the communist idea, is peace forever, for everybody, always, for the end of time. In the Islam, the jihadis are fighting for every human being on the earth would be a Muslim, because that then will be peace forever. And the globalists are the same. So the worst warriors are those who are fighting for peace.
That's right. There's another way to look at what you said was correct. There's another way to look at, I'm going to use an American term from our Declaration of Independence from the year 1776 of the secular calendar. And in the Declaration of Independence, it says that the function of the government is to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness for everybody, 100% of the people. So that's, even though you do not use those words that way in Israel, those words are very famous in America. Now,
okay, אז אני רק אתרגם, הממשלה באמריקה על פי החוקה, התפקיד שלה זה לשמור על החירות, ועל זכותו, על החירות, על החיים ועל זכותו של כל אדם למצוא את אושרו בכוחות עצמו.
So we in the democracies, which is half the world, we, as I just said, we believe in life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for everybody, not just for me, everybody. Now, the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues, all of which I call criminal organizations, they believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for 10% of the people. 10% of them. In other words, me, my family, and my friends, but not you. That's why we in democracy represent an existential risk to the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues. Because the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues are afraid that 90% of the people that they're stealing the money from will get angry, rise up, and take and destroy the 10%. So that's why the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues have declared war on us, not because we're bad. They declared war on us because we're good. And they cannot stand by and watch good people existing because it's an existential risk to their criminal organizations.
אוקיי, מה שכן אומר זה ששלושת הארגונים הגדולים, בעצם האידיאולוגיות הגדולות, שזה האסלאמיזם, הקומוניזם והגלובליזם, שהוא מכנה אותם ארגוני פשע, הם בעצם כל אחד מהם רוצה את אותם דברים בדיוק, הוא רוצה חירות, חיים והרדיפה אחרי העושר, אבל רק לעצמם, וזה מתקשר היטב אם חושבים על זה. מבחינת הקומוניסטים מגיע חירות ועושר לכל בני האדם, אלא אם כן הם אויבי המהפכה, זאת אומרת הם לא תומכים במפלגה. אותו דבר האסלאמיסטים, כאילו הם רוצים עושר ושלום וחופש לכולם, בתנאי שחוץ מלכופרים וכן הלאה. ומה שכן אומר זה שאנחנו, בגלל זה אנחנו, הם נלחמים איתנו בגלל שאנחנו רוצים את החירות ואת העושר ואת הרדיפה אחרי העושר, את החירות חיים ואת הרדיפה אחרי העושר עבור כולם. הם רודפים אחרינו לא בגלל שאנחנו הרעים, אלא בגלל שאנחנו הטובים.
נכון, very good. So now let me just spend a minute on exactly who are the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues. The Reds would be China and Russia. Russia is not a communist country anymore, but I still put them in the red. They would be more like a dictatorship. But I would also include North Korea, Cuba, Venezuela, and North Korea. And so these are the reds. The greens would be the Islamist countries, not the Muslim countries, the Islamist countries. The reason I say that is Islam is both a religion and a political movement. Everybody has a right to a religion, but everybody does not have a right to a political movement. So there are certain Muslim countries that I call Islamists. In other words, they're trying to impose politically or militarily, they're trying to impose Islam on other countries. That would be countries.
Yes, you take Iran, for example. They're using the term export the revolution.
Right. Right. So of which that's why I call them a criminal organization, because everybody has a right to a religion, but you do not have a right to go to someone else in a restaurant or in your neighborhood and say to them, you have to be like me or I'm going to kill you. That's called terrorism, and that's illegal. So, but it's not illegal to be a Muslim. It's just illegal and not illegal to be Christian or Jewish. But you cannot go to some person you do not know and say, you have to be like me or I'm going to kill you. So that's what I call Islamism. It's also called political Islam. It's also called...
Great, Ken, I've got to stop you and tell you that one of the viewers, Tali, has said, Ken the genius, over years and years, is trying to explain the dummies, the simple stuff, and they don't get it.
Well, in all of my career in healthcare for 45 years and national security for almost 25 years, I try to take complicated issues and make them simple so that everybody can understand. So that's my job. That's what I do. So now the Islamist countries would be Iran on the Shiite side, and on the Sunni side, it would be Qatar and Turkey. Those countries are building mosques, building schools, newspapers, radio, television, and they're trying to take over the world both physically and culturally. So those are the greens. And the blues would be the United Nations, because that's their color of their uniforms, of their soldiers. But it also includes the World Economic Forum, the drug cartels, and the social media companies. So
we actually were running a bit of a fight here against the WHO organization, who's just in a very extreme step has changed something like 300 different different subjects in his manifest, and he became an organization that rather than give advice, actually rules into, and for some reason we do not manage to get our leaders to understand that we need to leave this organization WHO yesterday, immediately before November.
Well, yes, I agree. Also, the World Health Organization should change its name to be the World Control Organization. And
exactly.
Now it's part of the United Nations, and everything the United Nations does is corrupt. I call the United Nations and all of its organizations, UNRWA, for example, to miseducate Arabs. All of these are criminal organizations. They have none of them are elected. By the way, the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues are all unelected entities. They're all illegitimate. They're all criminal organizations. And they're trying to tell the democracies where the leaders are elected how to behave. So this conflict I call World War III. We're in World War III right now. But I also...
Do you have any color for our Supreme Court who does exactly the same, unelected, unselected, and trying to tell our democracy and our leaders what should be a democracy and to rule everything about it?
Yes, I do not regard the Israeli Supreme Court as a legitimate organization. Just it's part of the Reds or part of the Blues, and sometimes it's part of the Greens. But in any case, it's an illegitimate organization, and it was not elected by the people. Now, in America, the Supreme Court is indirectly elected by the people. We elect a president, of course, and a Senate, and the president proposes a new Supreme Court justice, and the Senate approves it. So our Supreme Court is indirectly elected by the people, and therefore it's legitimate. The Israeli Supreme Court has not been elected by the people, and therefore is illegitimate. It's part of the problem. And one of the reasons why Israel has not done a great job fighting the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues is that the Supreme Court has prevented Israel from properly fighting the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues. So that's
or cooperating.
Yes, right. So it goes back to the issue that I mentioned, is we have to address all of the 100 problems. So the Supreme Court is one of your problems, but there's many other problems, but they're all part of a package of whereby the democracy has to reassert control over the management of government. You cannot have the outside enemies, the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues, telling democracies how to behave. By the way, if you look at Israeli history, particularly in the last 50 years, under all types of governments, Israel was listening to the advice of the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues. And all the advice was wrong. And Israel wanted to fit in with the world and wanted to be friends with the Reds and the Greens and the Blues, and ended up listening to misinformation from the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues. And now it has to reverse 50 years of mistakes. Not easy.
Ken, I think everybody feels that something is wrong, but I've got to ask you another question. It's the three colors are very different in ideas. They're only united in trying to overcome the West
and take over the world.
But
why they all want to take over the world?
Why do they cooperate with each other? Why they should have been enemies? If you want to rule the world, you take over all the world. You don't want partners.
Well, yes, you're right, but they're temporary partners. So they're just like Iran, Shiite, and Hamas work together, and Hamas is Sunni. Even though Shiites and Sunnis hate each other for 1,400 years, they work together. But if they ever actually succeed in destroying the West, then they will start killing each other. So they all say that they when everyone becomes Muslim, we'll have peace. Yeah, we'll just have another war between Sunni and Shiite, and
yes.
So let me just say a few things about Israel in particular. There's when I look at, I just mentioned that Israel made 50 years of mistakes, that it now has to reverse. It was a mistake to leave Gaza. It was a mistake to leave southern Lebanon.
Okay, so that's I'll translate. ישראל עשתה כבר 50 שנה של טעויות. זאת הייתה א', טעות לעזוב את עזה. Next.
It was a mistake to leave southern Lebanon.
לעזוב את דרום לבנון, זאת הייתה טעות.
And by the way, Ehud Barak is still giving people advice. You know, he gave southern Lebanon to Iran, and now he's giving advice to anyone. It's ridiculous. But anyways, that was a mistake. And signing the Oslo Accords with and setting up the Palestinian Authority was a mistake.
אוסלו הייתה טעות כמובן.
Now, leaving Sinai and giving it to Egypt was a mistake, but
לפנות את סיני היה טעות.
But it did not turn out to be an existential mistake because most of the Egyptian governments honored the not warm peace, but they honored the agreement with Israel, except for the 2 years.
Oh, here I've got a news for you. We have interviewed here an intelligent man for a very long time. He's retired now, but his obsession is to follow Egypt. He can't follow it using the measures of intelligence because it's not working, but he's just using open source knowledge. And he says that within the last few years, Egypt has doubled 10 times more her fighting abilities with the best weapons, and it all pointed into towards Israel.
Yes. Okay. So the point I'm getting to is it's obvious, 100% obvious, that leaving Gaza, leaving Lebanon, and giving 40% of Judea and Samaria to Palestinian Authority was a mistake. Today, it's not obvious that giving away Sinai to Egypt was a mistake. But eventually, since you never know who your neighbor, the leader of your neighbor will be, eventually there'll be someone like a Morsi, Muslim Brotherhood, and then it'll be obvious that giving Sinai to Egypt was a mistake. So call that a mistake in waiting, as opposed to an immediate mistake, obvious right now. Now, you also have to bear in mind, though, that Israel has 10 million people in it, and which is a great accomplishment. There was less than 1 million in 1948. So a huge accomplishment. But in Israel's younger days, when it had a smaller population, it was not as confident in itself as it is today. And so now with 10 million people, Israel should have all the confidence of a strong country, and therefore should guard its own interests and not listen to the bad advice of the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues. So, do you want to translate anything now, or should I?
Yes, okay. מה שכן אומר זה שכשאנחנו התחלנו היינו פחות ממיליון, עכשיו אנחנו 10 מיליון, אנחנו מדינה מאוד מאוד מצליחה, אנחנו יכולים לאמץ לעצמנו ביטחון עצמי מספיק כדי לא להקשיב לעצות הרעות שאנחנו מקבלים מהאדומים, שזה הסוציאליסטים והקומוניסטים, מהירוקים, שזה האסלאמיסטים, ומהכחולים, שזה הגלובליסטים והאום והפורום הכלכלי וכל החולרות האלה. I translated it a bit more bluntly than you said it, but
Okay, so now let me spend a few minutes looking at the issues of today. How did this balagan or mess in Gaza arise? And let me give you 7 thoughts that I had.
אוקיי, יש לנו 7 הבחנות שאנחנו הולכים לקבל עכשיו, על ההסתבכות עכשיו עם עזה. Please.
Number 1, the whole problem was a systemic failure. How do you say systemic failure in
כישלון שיטתי, כישלון שיטתי, כישלון של רב מערכתי.
By the way, in American history, 9/11 was a systemic failure.
גם נפילת התאומים הייתה כזאת.
And Pearl Harbor in 1941 was a systemic failure. When I say systemic failure, there's in the chain of command, from a prime minister, or in America from a president at the top, all the way down, the defense minister, the chief of staff, the Knesset, or we call the Senate or the House, the intelligence services, the political system, the schools, all the soldiers, the colonels, lieutenant colonels, all the way down to the privates, everybody failed. That's a systemic.
אוקיי, אני אתרגם רגע. הכשל המערכתי אומר שכמו בישראל, כמו בפרל הרבור, כמו בנפילת התאומים, היה כשל מערכתי, שזה אומר החל מהמנהיג, מראש הממשלה או מהנשיא, דרך הרמטכ"ל, שרי הביטחון, דרך מערכת הביטחון, דרך מערכת החינוך, בעצם של הכל. אני הייתי מוסיפה גם תקשורת. But Ken, I want to ask you, and that's a serious question that I'm struggling with myself. I think we now can all agree that there was a systemic failure in all levels of society. It's actually the governing arm. It's the I don't know how to say it. Juristic system. It's the education system. It's the all the media,
social media, Supreme
and
Court.
Actually, not even the Supreme Court, right? But I agree with you. But I've got to ask you a question. We are a democracy, like the United States, and if there is a systemic mistake, everybody believes in the same wrong thing. Isn't that legitimate? Like I'm feeling like I'm among a very few people who thinks that everybody is wrong. Everybody in every level are wrong. But in a democracy, it doesn't matter if everybody is wrong. Everybody legitimately wrong.
Yeah. So yes, you can say everybody's to blame and nobody's to blame. But
right, it's democracy. Everybody's got the right to be an idiot, and if everybody decides to be idiots together, that's democracy.
That's right. And so, by the way, democracies have, we call it an Achilles heel. If you remember from mythology of the Greeks, Achilles was big and strong, but he was weak in his leg, or we call it the heel, the ankle. And so that you just described the Achilles heel of democracy, is that yes, everybody has an opinion and everybody has a right to speak, but you're supposed to be educated when you speak. But that does not stop people from speaking. So people do not.
I know, but when we're talking about systemic problem, we're talking about the systemic of the systems that were meant to have the right idea. I mean, people in the social media, okay, they've got opinions and they should be heard. But if there is a conception, if there is, it's actually in the discourse, Israeli discourse is very much progressive, which means it's in an ideology. It's got its own philosophy, and if that's what rules us, how can you do anything about it? That's democracy. They decided for some reason, whatever took the idea that took over all of our systems, are legitimate systems, is progressive. Progressive is wrong, so we are all legitimately wrong together.
Yes, and but when did progressive thinking begin? So my favorite, there's 10 answers to that question, but I'll give you my favorite answer. You have to go back to the Torah. If you remember the story of the golden calf, Egel Zahav.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Right. So
Yeah.
I call the Egel Zahav and the people connected to it the first progressives. And we thought that they were defeated 3,400 years ago. And the reason they were defeated is we had a strong leader, Moshe Rabbeinu, the best leader in the history of leaders in the history of the world. And when he needed help, he called he called all the 12 tribes to help him. Only the Levites showed up because they were believers in the Torah, and they showed up to help, and they killed 3,000 people in I don't know, in 5 days, and that was the end of progressivism. But today,
okay, we don't have this privilege.
That's right.
To kill all the stupid.
Today, we do not have Moshe Rabbeinu, and we have Levites, but they do not carry swords, and they do not kill 3,000 people who disagree. So that was the time of the Torah. So here we are, that we're so much more advanced than the time of the Torah, and you can see that we're now totally mismanaged as democracies. Not just Israel. We have whatever problems you have in Israel, we have in America, or they have in Europe. And so the Achilles heel of democracy is that everybody has a voice, even if they know nothing. And now, by the way, the dictatorships have an Achilles heel. The Achilles heel is the 10% of the people are stealing everything from the other 90. So both the good guys and the bad guys have an Achilles heel, and we have to fix our problems, and because the dictatorships never can fix their problem.
I think, but it's a bit more complicated. But I believe personally, as I see it, it's my it's the way I analyze those things. We're living in Israel, at least for 30 years, under a really strict, not light dictatorship, but very, very strict dictatorship of the Supreme Court. And it seems like it's not only that Israel is not a democracy, it's not a democracy by the people who holds the law as hostage. They decide every given second what is legal and what is not. It's very, very random, and they decide as much as they run. But they also they took all the honor and the trust that comes to a Supreme Court, which is the place of justice. And what they're doing, while they're using their dictatorship force, they also educating the public that this is democracy. So you find yourself like in a place where you can't convince people that this is dictatorship, because they define themselves as the guiders of democracy. And it's getting very, very hard to explain to people. And you can explain it to people because you can use logic. But for some reason, the power of logic itself has fallen so low that people can understand the logic, but then they go after what they feel and know and got educated and brainwashed, I think.
Yes. Well, in general, in democracy, half of the people are rational. In other words, they use their brains, and half of the people are emotional. So they use their heart. I mean, emotions are also in your brain, but we usually say use the heart to discuss emotions. And so in general, what you call the right is rational, not all the time, but in theory. And what you call the left is emotional.
maybe I'll translate, I start to translate that. כן מחלק את האנשים, הוא טוען שבדמוקרטיה אנשים מתחלקים חצי חצי, אלה שהם אמוציונליים ואלה שהם רציונליים. לטענתו הימין נוטה להיות רציונלי והשמאל נוטה להיות אמוציונלי. I'm not sure I totally agree about that, but because I think otherwise. I think that whoever we called left now is those are the people who are exposed very much to what I would call, I don't know how to say it otherwise, brainwash. And the brainwash, you're using the word brains, but it's a lot of it. It's manipulation over your feeling. It's a feeling wash. And I don't think the left would have been from the beginning, like even in a, the left is not essentially emotional, and the right was never essentially rational. It's actually, you can even say it otherwise. I don't think it's essentially that or that, but the kind, if while once once you got the kind of brainwash that the left is using, you are definitely thinking from emotions, and it's those people. It's very hard to speak sense to them. And the right, I don't think the right is necessarily rational. He's less brainwashed, therefore he's more sensible.
Right.
But that's all.
Okay. Now, when I watch on Israeli television, there's always someone who says, "Bibi caused this problem. Bibi caused the problem," and I say to myself, I say, "There's 100 people who caused the problem." So I pretend that you could talk to the television. So I say, "Why don't you list all the 100 people who are to blame?"
They do what they do is they got the Minister of Defense, the head of the army, all those who are really are to blame. They caused them to admit it's their blame, and then said, "Okay, well done. Okay, you say sorry, so it's fine." Now the only one who doesn't take responsibility is the Prime Minister. Actually, the last one of the 100 people, but once he will take the responsibility, they said, "Here, you admit yourself. Now resign." That's what they wouldn't tell the other one who's just paid what they were asked to pay. Took responsibility, and that's all. Everything forgiven. And it's not. I don't think that the head of the intelligence that was absolutely to blame should have been forgiven. I don't think he should have stayed in this being so wrong, stay in this position while we're fighting for our existence. But the thing is, they want Benjamin Netanyahu to admit that he was wrong, and unlike the other, they will kick him off for that, and they'll use it as a proof that he admits that it's his fault, that he's a killer, a murderer.
Right. By the way, everyone in the opposition was wrong. Everybody in the past 50 years in the opposition was wrong. The 30 years of the Supreme Court illegal coup is wrong. Every Supreme Court justice if they're still living, for the past 30 years was wrong. Almost everyone managing the secular school system was wrong. So this is what I call systemic failure. I also.
But on the other hand, what we can say that Netanyahu hasn't fixed it. I don't know whether when he got it, it was already fixable. I'm not sure because I know before Rabin government was already so much corrupted that when you've got some corruption, it's unfixable. And let's see who was wrong. We had Yitzhak Rabin and Peres, who were in charge of Oslo agreement, which was the start of our mistakes. And then there were the government of Ulmert, who was trying to give all the Judea and Samaria to the Arabs. And there was Ehud Barak, of course, that took the army out of Lebanon and give everything to the Hezbollah, including our arms. And then the Supreme Court, of course, the Supreme Court actually forced the army. There are instructions of firing to a soldier, and it goes like that. If the minute you have a life-threatening risk, and that's in a situation of life-threatening risk, you should first try to escape. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly. Afterwards, if it's still on, you shoot a gummy bullet, and only if there's no other way, you shoot in the head, in the leg, and that's in a immediate life-threatening situation. So you can't. The court has taken over even in the level of the soldier in the situation to protect himself and others and us.
Yes, because Israel now is a half democracy and a half dictatorship. And it's trying to be a normal government fighting a war for its existence. You're fighting the 1948 war right now. Or if you want to go back in the past, you're fighting the Golden Calf War, however you want to look at it. And you cannot fight when half of the government is a democracy and half is a dictatorship. Democracies and dictatorship do not marry each other. One of them wins and one of them loses. There's no coexistence with a dictatorship. So,
and what do you do? There is a saying, and it's a very profound saying that you can't force nation to citizens to live in a democracy. If half of our people do not want democracy, they want to be ruled by the Supreme Court, you can't force them and still be a democracy. It's those questions. You wouldn't imagine that one day you will have to struggle with them, but that's what we struggle with them with now. People who do not want to live in a democracy. They want to be dictated by the Supreme Court, who doesn't even like us. The Supreme Court does not like Israel, does not like Israelis, does not like Jews. And they really feel very strongly they are willing to make a whole revolution to burn Israel, and for their rights to be controlled by the Supreme Court. So what can you do? What can you do and still consider yourself a Democrat or a liberal? I'm struggling with it because I don't know. If you don't want to live in democracy, I can't force you.
Well, that's why the Likud party, the government, the prime minister was correct to seek reform of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is out of control and has to be brought under control like a normal democracy. Israel's not a normal democracy. No democracy gives the Supreme Court the powers that the Supreme Court took for itself illegally. So in the changes that were proposed by the government were very modest, very modest. As an American, I looked at this and said, this is not enough change. This is too modest. And what the Supreme Court did is it worked with the opposition to create an illegal coup.
That's exactly what happened.
In democracies, when you organize an illegal coup, you go to jail. In the olden days, you would be hanging like in biblical days. So the Supreme Court worked with the opposition to create an illegal coup, exaggerating the very modest changes proposed by the Netanyahu government. got half of the people emotionally excited, misled. And then while the Jews were fighting each other, the Supreme Court and the left, working with foreign enemies, which is treason, created huge turmoil. And so the government was spending half of its time, instead of fighting the enemies outside, were fighting the Jews inside.
They actually, Ehud Barak went to, he was interviewed in one of the American broadcasts, I don't remember which one, and he said that what they are going to do is disconnect the army from the government, and the army will be operate by himself. He will take care of the security of Israel by himself, and it will cause extreme danger to our security. And he blamed Netanyahu for it, because he said the minute Netanyahu will pass on the first call, the first law that we want to pass, to just narrow down the principle of I'm not sure the English. Reasonableness, which is ridiculous. It was just randomness in the court, and it doesn't exist in any place. Ehud Barak has said to the camera in front of millions, he said that then they'll start the revolution, they'll disconnect the army, they won't serve, and it will be on Netanyahu's fault. And a lot of people actually believe that because he was blackmailing blackmailing Netanyahu and actually threatening in an army coup, it's Netanyahu's fault, because he did actually let this law pass in the first call.
Right. Now, in a normal country, Ehud Barak would have been arrested for treason. He would be in jail right now. And if Israel had a normal Supreme Court, the Supreme Court would agree with that and say that people...
Actually, this is the war of the Supreme Court, because it started when the elected government of the democracy of Israel has tried to take a tiny bit of the absolute power that the Supreme Court have. And now you don't hear, you very, very often you hear ex-Supreme Court people are coming to speak, especially in a situation of crisis. You didn't hear yet a word from the leader of the Supreme Court, the leader of the system that make the Supreme Court dictatorship, Aaron Barak. You don't hear a word from him, and he was working with Barak. That's why I call this war the lightning. The Barak is struck twice, because this is the Barak and Barak war.
So in a normal country, both of the Baraks would have been arrested for treason. And I have a dream that one day both Baraks will walk into a police station and announce that they are guilty of government malpractice, and that they will voluntarily sit in jail for 10 years to atone for their sins. But that's just a dream. And then I wake up and I say, oh, that was just a dream.
Because what I fear is what I see in Israel is a full-scale revolution according to all the doctrines of revolution. First of all, create a turmoil. Before that, create chaos, and chaos that starts in making everything unsure, making everything hard to understand. And then they created chaos, a violent chaos in the streets. They burnt the roads. They had violent demonstrations, and then they've disconnected the army from the government. They created such a deep disbelief between the army by using the high rank officers, which have got a lot of they when they speak, people are listening to them because people in the army are used to obey their commanders. So they use those commanders that people used to obey to them, and they've created such a big crisis of disbelief between the government and the army, and then a crisis, surprise, surprise, has arrived. I don't, even in my worst dream, do not believe that they've done it on purpose. But what they've done on purpose is that they made they compromise on our security so much that the enemy has used it, and now they're proceeding on with it while doing all their best to try to get Netanyahu to resign, with lies, with propaganda, with brainwash, and they're trying also on the other side to gain sympathy of the people by pretending to be their benefactor. This organization, I'm sure you know, Achim Laneshek, as for nine months they were prosecuting religious people, actually chasing them, and really in an anti-Semitic way. And now they're collecting money to help those people who got in the same people. Some of them are religious, most of them were against them. They are delivering goods to the and I think what I'm afraid, and this is the last sentence, what I'm afraid, as I see the revolution going on, they will manage to take Netanyahu out of his throne. They already put their people in the united government, and then they will use the victory, because it has to be a victory, because otherwise we won't be here and we'll all be slaughtered. So they'll use the victory of those people to gain control over the government, and the first thing they will do is they will create Palestinian state in Judea and Samaria, and kick away from there the half million Jews who most of them were fighting in the war, and their families.
Okay, so you're now getting to the key issue of my book, The Multifront War.
Okay.
And if you remember in the beginning, I'll say as we conclude, I'll say that we have 100 problems, and you just mentioned many of the 100. But to make it simple, the reds, the greens, and the blues are outside enemies and inside enemies. In other words, the left, which I call the reds, the greens, and the blues, outside are inside. And our outside enemies, both, not just in Israel, we have the same problem in America. The reds, the greens, and the blues on the outside have infected the left opposition parties in Israel and in America. And these left parties are corrupt, 100% corrupt. So with some money, the reds, the greens, and the blues have infiltrated Israel society. And so when these opposition people come up with different ideas, I say to myself, where did they get these ideas? Because they're not very smart people. And I say, someone here is smart. So I say, did they get ideas from the smart people in the Russian KGB? The smart people in the Chinese equivalent of the KGB? Did they get information from the Muslim Brotherhood, Turkey, Qatar, from Iran, criminal organization, or the United Nations, which is basically controlled by China now? The World Health Organization is controlled by China now. So you and people listening, every time some Israeli opposition leader comes up with a stupid idea, say to yourself, where did he get that stupid idea? Is he smart enough to think of this stupid idea by himself? Or did he get help from foreign enemies, the reds, the greens?
Okay, Ken, I can tell you that. I've got some expertise in Marxism and neo-Marxism thought. And a lot of those ideas, I know exactly where they come from. They didn't, those leaders who say the stupid things, they didn't make it up. It just makes sense according to some of, communist propaganda. And I'll give you one example. We've got the one who was in the head of the army, Benny Gantz, and he's now in the United government that we formed, and he took pride in front of a English-speaking audience. I don't know where it was, and he was taking pride of the fact that he, as commander-in-chief of the army, has given orders to compromise on our soldiers' life just to save the lives of citizens of the enemy during the war. And I want to say again, that kind of an idea, it's even preceding, it's even go out of all the propaganda of the KGB. The KGB wouldn't have dreamed of putting such an idea into people's heads, because everybody would understand immediately that it's stupid and it's immoral in the worst kind. But there you are.
That's right. So it's an alert for everybody listening today. Whenever you hear something stupid, do not think you're stupid. You're very smart, logical, common sense, and you say this is a stupid idea, and then ask yourself, where someone gets such a stupid idea? Our foreign enemies have been corrupting our internal enemies to say something this stupid because it's not in our interest.
I'll just have to translate that. כן אומר לכם, וזו מסקנה שאני הגעתי אליה רק בגיל 50. אתם לא מטומטמים, אתם הציבור, אתם חכמים. עכשיו, אם אתם שומעים מישהו מהמנהיגים שלכם, מישהו מהמנהיגים אומר משהו מטומטם, אל תחשבו שאתם מטומטמים, זה כנראה הוא, והוא לא המציא את הרעיון המטומטם. מישהו מאוד מאוד חכם חשב להשתיל לו את הרעיון המטומטם, כי זה משרת מישהו אחר לגמרי, מאשר הוא עצמו, ובטח לא משרת אותנו.
So I think our time is almost up. Is there something else you want me? I can talk for another 5 minutes if you want.
Yes, I want to ask you. You are saying that there is the West is threatened now by at least 3 major colors. It's the red, which is a socialist communist, and it's China and North Korea, and maybe Russia, because you don't have to be religious to have religious superstitions. So you don't have to be communist to have communist and KGB ideas. Okay, so that makes sense. And you've got the Islamist, of course, and you've got the globalist. So what's each and every one of them has got in his mind? Does each color think, I'll be using the other colors just to get to rule the world and then I'll kick them out? Or what are you thinking to me? Because they can't rule together, because Islamism doesn't go with globalism, and definitely not in communism. Communism doesn't go with global. They don't go together. So what after they'll demolish the West, they'll demolish Israel, they'll demolish the United States. How come? What would all those who were indoctrinated by globalists to change their sex for one example, and then the Islamism will rule? What would be with them? What they had in mind? Every one of those who are in the head of the other colors really believes that his color will prevail.
Yes, but they each of the different colors think they will prevail, and they're just using each other to destroy democracy. Now, but each of them has a different conception of what the world will be like when they take control. So, for example, the Islamists, Iran, and Turkey and Qatar, the Muslim Brotherhood countries, would all agree with this statement that I see many times in terror literature. Christians, Jews, and Hindus will convert to Islam or we're going to kill them. That's a very common sentence in Islamism. Now, the Turkey and Qatar have a different thought than Iran. Iran are professional killers. Okay, so they think they're going to take over the world and just kill everybody who's not like them. Whereas Turkey and Qatar, the Muslim Brotherhood, they just want to have mosques in schools, television, radio, and intimidate everybody else to stay alive, but basically work for them as slaves. So I do not think Qatar and Turkey want to kill everybody, but their friends in Al-Qaeda and ISIS want to kill everybody. But the bad guys have different ideas as to what the world will look like when they take over. Now, the smartest of all the bad guys are the Chinese. There's a lot of Chinese, 1.4 billion, and they do not want to kill everybody. They want everybody to be their slave, sort of like the Muslim Brotherhood, and but not kill it. They want everybody to keep working, make money, produce new products, and just be quiet and not complain about the Chinese communist rule. So they have a different conception. The blues are in general part of the Chinese. So I'd say the Chinese control much of the blues, the United Nations, World Health Organization. And so from the Chinese point of view, they're probably saying to themselves, Russia is not a threat to me anymore. I can, whenever I want, I can take over the eastern part of Russia and have Siberia for myself. So the Chinese probably say, I'm in control of the reds. I'm in control of the blues. Temporarily, I'm not in control of the greens. But when they fulfill their function to me and I take over the world, I will treat them like the Uyghurs.
But they don't understand that the most murderous kind will prevail eventually and get rid of the progressives of the United psychopaths in the United Nations and in the economic forum and the communists as well. The most murderous you are, you will prevail. This is a Hobbesian jungle. In the Hobbesian jungle, the most violence one will last till the end. They don't understand it.
Yeah, that's why I think ultimately, if the bad guys win, the Chinese will end up killing all the Muslims, or as they say, re-educate them, and until they
maybe harvest their organs.
That's right.
Right. Okay, so Ken, before I'm thanking you, I've got to say this was the first conversation. I'd like to invite you over for the second part. Actually, you will tell us what we need to do, how we can fight this thing and win. Is that okay?
Yes, there's roughly 100. If there's 100 problems, there's 100 solutions. And yes, next time we can discuss what 100 things in a perfect world. What 100 things would you do to solve the 100 problems?
But one thing we need to be, I think, the conclusion. One thing is sure: the next years or decades, we don't expect peace. We will have to fight for our life, for our freedom, and to our pursuit of happiness, and that will definitely be a fight, isn't it?
That's right. It'll be a fight for us to maintain our freedoms because the dictatorships of the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues are all trying to take our freedoms away because, as I said in the beginning, our freedoms represent an existential threat to the dictator criminal organizations behind the Reds, the Greens, and the Blues.
So, Ken Abramowitz, thank you very, very much for this, I think, very important conversation. And I advise everybody to go to SaveTheWest.com. And there's there's years of articles there. And I promise you that we'll drag Ken over here again. And thank you very much, Ken, for dedicating your very, very busy life to us. It was very important, and I'm glad you came over. Thank you very much.
Okay, it was a pleasure to be with you, and I look forward to our second discussion on how to fix this mess. And I'll just leave you, maybe some of your people, your listeners, have read books by Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss was a very famous in America, I hope in Israel.
Dr. Seuss, of course, everybody knows.
Right. So he wrote one of my favorite books and was called If I Ran the Zoo. Do you remember that book, If I Ran the Zoo?
No.
Oh, so it was about a 6-year-old child who decided that he could manage a zoo. How do you say zoo in Hebrew?
Gan Chayot.
Yeah, he could manage it better than the managers. And of course, it became total chaos. He let all the animals out of the cages. But so I have an expression, if I ran the zoo, what would I do? Because that was taken from the book. So we can dedicate our second session together. You can title it, If I Ran the Zoo, What Would I Do?
I would definitely do it. It's lovely. And I've got something to say about that, but I won't at the moment. Thank you very much. And thank you for everybody who's been with us. I saw what you were writing. And thank you, Ken.
Okay,
See you very soon.
And thank you for all that you do. We all have to do a better job educating ourselves and educating each other. So congratulations for what you do.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Bye. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Lehitrod.
עזרא? זה היה קשה. איך היה?